Ke mihi rapu hia whaia turu tapu nui a tānei te waiora, tānei te wānaka, tānei te tukaraki puta ki te whaia o ki te ao marama. Tū te kana, tū te maraka, te tūhi te rara, me e nohe te matara nei, e roko whakiiri aki ki roka ki a tīna haumi e hui e tā ki e.
Huira ki te raki he tuhi raki. Huira ki te papa he whao nuku. Ahono atu koe ki ngā pau o pau tare raki ko tahu kūmea, ko tahu whakairoa. Ta tuku nei ai koe ki te pō, tifa te pō, tifa te ao. Kere te pō, kere te ao. Tako te pō, tako te ao. Ka karo koe ki te pō e, oti atu ai e, taki au e, taki au e. Mo te mōtoi, kuriru nei e, te mōtoi. O tua huriri, te mōtoi o huikai, te mōtoi o waiwai. Hai o te manua, me te mōtoi kuriru nei e, moi ra oki moi e te rakatira e tiari. Ore mātou ware tia i a koe mo te mahi ko te taunere katai au ki Waitaha. O koe te tia mana o te roputuia te taiwa. Ki e whawhai o Waihora me te wai kirikiri i te taha a John Ma mo te ropu tuatahi i reira. O ki kuia te kai whakahaere tuatahi o te runanga o Ngaitahu. O ia hoki te tia mana o Koukou Rarata me Ngai Tuahuriri. Tōna mana i whakahaere i Koukou Rarata, i whakahaere i te runanga o Ngaitahu. I ako ia tērā i te wā hoia o tūmetauenga, te ropu o tūmetauenga hoki. Nō reira, e te rakatira, moi oki mai. Kaore mātou e ware tia i a koe e anku. O tō mahi, i tiaki manaaki te taio, i tiaki manaaki ngā tikanga kaua. Hoki, he poi, pena te rainga kai raro i aia. O au tētahi o tērā i whakahaere i au, i te wā tipuaki au kei raro i te mahi o ngā kaumātua. Nō reira, e te rakatira ki au te moi i tēnei wā. Kia ora tātou. I stand here just to acknowledging Giles Croft, aka Uncle Charlie, for the work not only he has done for Environment Canterbury, but also for his mahi at his home, his two homes of Port Levy and also at Tuahiwi, but also for his work with our Councillor Sanknell here, and John will talk about that committee for Selwyn and Waihora. Charlie was an integral member of that zone committee. Not only that, when I stepped down as one of the chairs of Te Roputuia, Charlie took over from myself for a short while until his illness made him not available to come to all our Te Roputuia meetings. Also to acknowledge everyone here today for our mahere roa, for our long-term plan as well. But first and foremost, I wanted to stand here today to acknowledge Uncle Charlie, Charles Crofts, for his mahi, not only for ECAN, but also for Te Hapori and Te Runanga o Ngaitau, mai te pari nui whiti, tai atu ki te moana kiwa. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tata katoa. Kia ora rā. I would also open the floor at this time, if anyone else would like to share their thoughts regarding the mahi of Uncle Charlie, and also acknowledging his whānau who are kei raro te kapu Pauri, who are in mourning at the moment at Koukou Rarata at Tūtuhurewa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tata katoa. Kia koe no.
Yesterday, Koukou Rarata, it was a very, very solemn Ohiritia for the Tangianga. I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of things about Charles Stewart Crofts. Definitely born in Tuihiwi. His roots are also in Ngāti Waiwai on the Taipotini under the whānau Wepu. He is related not only to me as a brother-in-law, but if you go through his other whakapapa, it is a Barrett whakapapa. And W.D. Barrett actually is one of the, was one of the great leaders of Ngāi Tahu. Actually, back in Charlie was the one responsible, as were a number of others. And I want to mention Rakihia Henare Tau as well, because he is the one who actually lodged the final part of the claim. But Charlie was on the Ngāi Tahu Trust Board, and that transitioned into Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu. And then Charlie became the first chair of Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu. Then the other parts of what Charlie done or did do for the iwi yesterday during the Pōhiri. I went around the island actually, as I sometimes do, starting at Aoraki and then acknowledging Kati Huirapa Papatupu of Arowhenua, Waihao, Moiraki and Puketeraki, and then continued to Pupikuda, Otago, and then down to through the Catlins, and then down to Rakiuda, Stewart Island, and then across to the Taipotini, the west coast, and then up to Kātiritiri o Te Moana, up to Kaikoura, and then back through here to the peninsula, to the Papatupu Runanga of the peninsula, and particularly Ngāti Huikai, which is where Charlie is laying and where he will be buried, and then finished up at Tuihiwi, Ngāi Tuahuriri. And the reason for that is because it was actually to reflect all of those areas, all of those places that Charlie had touched. And it was his immense influence as a chief negotiator that was significant in acknowledging all of those places that actually have benefited from the claim, and particularly from the work that Charlie Crofts actually undertook and continued to do up until Charlie died late on Sunday evening. But anyway, he had quite a colourful political journey with Ngāi Tahu, and that will be documented later in a book. So I just wanted to stand here and acknowledge, and for the Hansard, the minutes, that it's actually definitely there in that what Charles Stewart Crofts and the influence that he had on Ngāi Tahu. Kati Mamoi, Waitaha. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I've got emotional. Charlie was an old bull and I was a young bull, and we would sit across from each other in Selwyn District in the meetings. And Charlie would talk about wanting everything to happen in 5 years. And we would argue like hell that it couldn't happen. And then he would concede that it would take generations to turn the waka about. You cannot turn a waka about immediately, but the absolute vision, the passion and the drive was for things to happen within 5 years. He was cantankerous, he was fun, we would wind each other up, he would grin, he'd give me a wink, and then he would set forth on a speech. That's the meeting after the meeting before where he had agreed or abstained and then wanted to relitigate something in the minutes the next week, and we could spend half an hour on it. But we knew we were winding each other up, and we constantly did it. And what I really appreciated on Charlie is we could argue about anything, and then at the end of the day, we just switched off and we were mates, and we could walk out and have a go at each other and be fun. But he just had that absolute passion for what he wanted to achieve. And that came through the negotiations on the Ngāi Tahu bill all the things that he had done before as kai whakahiring. He used to joke that thank God he was Charlie Crofts, because just the size of the man, one Croft wouldn't have been enough, so at least he needed to be in plural. But that was the kind of humour, that was the kind of thing, the argument, the debate that we could have. We could be honest, have fun, debate and walk away. He was someone special. He always had a laugh, he always had a grin, but you knew exactly where he was coming from and you knew exactly what he wanted. It is a sad day that we lose Uncle Charlie. He was one of those people that you could have fun with, debate, understand, but then walk away, have a cup of tea and be friends. Thank you. Hurrah.
Tēnā tātou. Ka tū au i nā nei, ki te tautoko te mihi Ian, tū te haunoku, John, ki Uncle Charlie. E uncle, moi mai rā te rangatira kua wheturangitia. Me mihi hoki ki tō whānau kirimati, ka nui te mihi aroha kia rātou, i tēnei wā, i roto i te poho tū te hurewa i nai nei. I just wanted to stand and acknowledge too and support the words that Ian and Tū Te Haunuku and John have given. My time with Charlie started when I started at Turunanga Naitaho as a young 20-year-old, and I spent a year travelling the length of Aotearoa with him and an organisation called the Treaty Tribes Coalition, which Charlie moved on to after he stepped down as the kaipakahaere of Turunanga. With the kaumātua of that organisation, and our mission was to try and settle the Treaty of Waitangi Fisheries settlement that had been in the courts for a while, and that's what we went around the country to do. So I got to spend lots of time with Uncle Charlie and Toko, because I was the young one and the other ones were doing other stuff, and I really treasure those times I got to spend with him and Toko. You know, they shared a lot of wisdom with me, while the others might have been doing more other social activities. And also used to, have to book the flights, take them around in the minivans, and take them to different places that they wanted to go. So had a great time, and like others have said, massive sense of humour, but a massive warrior for our people too. Never back down from an argument or a discussion. And other things that I'll remember about Charlie, and hopefully, those things flow through in some of us that spent time with him. So yeah, mihi to Charlie and Medi and the whānau at Tūtehurua at the moment, Ngāti Huikai, who I know are mourning great loss. I also want to turn my mind to another person who's passed away this week that I just remembered about. And I spent a bit of time with this person too, another champion for our taiao here in Waitaha, and that's Leslie Shand. So she's a sister of former Ekan councillor Diana Shand, and she passed away on Sunday. So just want to acknowledge her, amazing advocate for conservation in Waitaha. I got to spend time with Leslie doing Kiwi listening in the Huranui when I was a youngster, and never forget the inspiration that Leslie showed to us then, the knowledge she had, and her, just countless hours of community and voluntary effort to help our unique flora and fauna. So you just want to acknowledge Leslie as well, and to Charlie. Tēnā koutou.
Yeah, thank you. And just to round this out, I'll get Craig to read a citation that was given to Charlie.
Kia ora tātou. Yeah, so in December 2017, an outstanding contribution award was given to Charles Stuart Crofts and to his whānau, and it was a recognition of his outstanding contribution that he's made not only to the council, but as a Turunanga Koko Rarata representative engaged in Environment Canterbury 2-year partnership. Charles had a long association with Environment Canterbury and its predecessor, the North Canterbury Catchment Board. Charles was one of the early advisors to the council at the time of the Resource Management Act was enacted in 1991. He was also a founding member, we've already mentioned, of the Selwyn Waihora Water Zone Committee, the Paiheringa, and also Te Rōpū Tuia. As I said, he took over from myself as the chair of Te Rōpū Tuia with the Dame, Margaret Baisley, and at the time of December 2017. He was also still the co-chair then. As we know, he was a champion of Naito values and gained absolute respect from fellow Canterbury Water Management Strategy Committee members, mayors, councillors, farmers, environmentalists, and all others. His leadership has been critical in the success of the CWMS. His commitment to the natural resources management predates the CWMS, in particular his unwavering obligation to the Naito settlement with the Crown. And as Nook's already mentioned, when he was on the A team for the Naito A team for the negotiations with the Crown, he travelled all around Te Waipoinamu and responsible for negotiating directly with ministers and resolving any major differences. The A team used the 9 tall trees as their evidence for the claim, with the 9th tall tree being Mahinga Kai. Mahinga Kai is now a principal focus for CWMS work, and it still is today. So this was saying, so a sincere thank you to Charlie and his whānau for his lifelong work to sustain the health of the land, rivers, lakes, harbours and coastline of Waitaha, Canterbury. And back then, the council acknowledged his mahi, and we still do today for his positive and influential leadership that provided to our staff and the wider community. Nō reire, te rangatira moi mai rā, oki oki mai. Kia ora.
Good, thank you for that, for those acknowledgement. A significant person and personality to Ngāi Tahu, to Kokorauta, to Ngāi Tuhuriri, and to us. So rest in peace, Charles Croft. All right, just before we get into the agenda, can I acknowledge David Hill from North Canterbury News, and also Keela McDuff from the press, who are with us today. Apologies. We've got Councillor Burns online and Councillor Ward online. I've got an apology for lateness from Councillor Diche, but I'm not too sure whether that's a permanent one or just a partial one. I'll leave it as a partial one for lateness. And
yeah, just to acknowledge that myself and Councillor Thunkner will be leaving at 12:15 to head over to Pukara.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. Thank you for that. All right, conflicts of interest. There's no conflicts of interest. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Genevieve.
Yeah, I'm standing back from the hour conversation and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and my apologies for missing that. Conflicts of interest have been noted by Councillor Robinson in agenda item 7.2. Public forums, we do not have any public forum today. Extra and urgent ordinary business, we don't have any, and no notice of motion. And I would note that there will be no public excluded session today as the report is not available for that part of the meeting. Okay, 7.1, which is the long-term plan, and I'm given that Catherine, maybe yourself and Giles are going to come to the table for that. I would note that I circulated a memo saying that councillors would get 2 minutes to speak to these items, and we would suspend standing orders. But standing orders, in fact, say that temporary suspension of standing orders allows 5 minutes each. And I would just hope that you don't take the 5 minutes, but that opportunity is there. So we'll put that motion up because we need to move that motion. And I'll just need a, so that's the motion. And so it suspends C, which is other members, not more than 5 minutes. So it suspends that. So thank you, Craig, and a seconded by Grant. Thank you, Grant. All those in favour, please say aye. And all those against, that's carried. And can I just say that someone needs to remind us to come out of that piece of advice. So 7.1 to Craig and Grant. So this is a significant piece of work that we do every 3 years, which is our long-term plan. And this is to endorse the draft document that will go out to the community for consultation processes. And it's included on pages 6 to 347 of the agenda, and the recommendations for this are on page 6. So Catherine Trott and also assisted by Giles will introduce this paper. Thank you, Catherine.
Kia ora, and thank you, Chair. It's with pleasure I introduce this item, which seeks the council approval to consult on the 2024-34 consultation document. and approve the supplementary information which supports that. There are a number of recommendations. I'm just going to say a few words and then hand to Giles to talk around the audit matters. But in terms of the process of getting to today, the consultation document, What's the Cost to Waitaha Canterbury, which is attached, conveys the key elements of the Council's proposed long-term plan 24-20 to 34 and the draft revenue and financing policy, and is the principal means by which the Council will consult with the community. And the supplementary information contains proposed service measures, resourcing requirements, strategy and policy documents that's subject to your approval today, and the deliberations later in the financial year will form the basis of the long-term plan. So just the process from here, in terms of the consultation process that is proposed, is that the consultation period will be open from the 13th of March to the 14th of April, where we will gather submissions and feedback from the community. Hearings are scheduled for the end of April, early May. There's 4 days of hearings, and deliberations on what you've heard through that process will take place on the 22nd and 23rd of May. At that stage, after the deliberations, you'll provide guidance to staff so that we can prepare the final long-term plan for your adoption at the end of June for a 1 July start to the financial year. I might then just hand to Giles just to talk through the audit matters.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Chair. The audit of the consultation document and supporting information was completed by Audit New Zealand, our appointed auditor from the Auditor General's Office, and was reported to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee last week. An unmodified audit opinion with one emphasis of matter. The reason that I just wanted an opportunity to clarify, and we've just tabled a short paper, is in order for the Council to be able to adopt the consultation document, it does need to have received the audit letter from Audit New Zealand. In order for them to issue it, they need to have received the letter of representation signed by the Chair. So Peter, whilst the recommendations say approves and delegates to, Peter has signed that because Yvonne is not here. So Peter has signed the letter of representation, which basically says we have done what we need to do as an organisation and provided their audit with the information that they require to complete their audit. That has allowed Yvonne to sign and send the audit letter, which then allows this council, should it choose to do so, to adopt the consultation document to send to the community.
Right, so thank you. That's reasonably clear. We've got a clear audit. We've got a process that's open for us to be able to move this document forward. Is there any clarification at all from either Catherine or Giles regarding this matter? All right, I think what we'll ask you to do, therefore, is step back and we'll put the first of all, I've lost it now. First of all, we'll put the motion. Just note here that we will possibly take 1, 2, and 3 together, 4, 5, and 6 together. So we can leave 1, 2, and 3 up there, but 4, 5, and 6 together, and then 7 together separately. And we are able to do that. Signing the audit representation letter and delegates to the chair of the authority. The independent audit. What's the cost to Waitaha Canterbury? That's the document we're approving. Ihahai Utu Kiti Waitaha Ki Waitaha Canterbury, in accordance with section 93C 4 of the Local Government Act 2002, and resolves on the basis of the independent auditor's report that the consultation document will achieve the purpose of providing an effective basis for public participation and local authority decision-making processes relating to the content of the draft long-term plan in accordance with sections 93B and 93D of the Local Government Act. So basically putting the rationale behind why we actually do this before you. To me, that is just a process that doesn't need a lot of chat, but would someone like to move those 3? Grant. seconded by, moved by councillor Edge and seconded by councillor Cranwell. So we'll get to speak to that now, Grant, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, firstly, I'd like to thank Yvonne Yang and her team at Audit New Zealand and our own staff for their efficient and collaborative effort in being able to consider the financial implications of the long-term plan over the last few months. I'll just read a note from Audit New Zealand in terms of their opinion. In our opinion, the consultation document provides A, fairly represents the matters proposed for inclusion in the long-term plan, and 2, identifies and explains the main issues and choices facing the Regional Council and the Canterbury region and the consequences of those choices, and the information and assumptions underlying the information in the consultation document are reasonable. Yvonne, Audit New Zealand also identify what's called an emphasis matter. It doesn't change their opinion that I've just read out, but it does draw attention to a particular disclosure related to the uncertainty over funding of public transport futures programs. And without modifying their opinion, on page 45, which states this, outlines a high level of uncertainty over Whakakapi New Zealand Transport Agency's expected funding of the public transport futures program. If the agency does not provide funding or provides less funding than assumed, the public transport investment plans will either not proceed or will be reconsidered depending on the level of funding received, which will affect the proposed levels of service. And of course, we're now waiting for the outcome of the government's GPS program. The report on page 6 to 9 also identifies some risks and issues that they focused their attention on when they were evaluating our documentation. One of them was the proposed rates increase, and they noted the provision of the 3 options for each of the core services, with our preferred option setting an average rate of about 24.2%, depending on where people live, their property value and other circumstances. And although we show our rates rise over year 1 and year 2 that exceeds our quantified limit on rates of suggested at 10%, Council considers this to be for natural capital expenditure consistent with previous long-term plan decisions and will enable delivery of issues related to intergenerational planning. One of the other key issues with climate, consider that in all 3. Works, but more importantly, we'll look to transition towards more nature-based and adaptive solutions in the future. They note some other matters in terms of the balanced budget, for example, on page 9, noted the forecast of a deficit of 10.2 million for 2025, which I've just talked about, and acknowledged Council's view that this is prudent operating expenditure related to regulatory framework planning, which returns a surplus in 2026. We also note the recommendations in the report and constructive comments to management, including conducting an infrastructure strategy peer review during the next LTP process at 27. So yeah, just a brief comment. So thanks very much for that, and we received that.
Right, Jane, as the seconder of the motion, has said that he'll reserve his comment till the end. Are there other councillors that wish to comment on this section, given that it is just the auditor's opinion on our processes rather than the outcomes? So there's no one else wants to speak on that. So Grant, we can go to Yane. Do you want to speak on that, Yane, or you're happy?
Oh no, just to really to not once again acknowledge the opinion from the auditors, and you know, it's as a process that they're happy for us to continue. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
I don't know how much more you can add to what you added, Grant, but I'll go back to you.
No, nothing more to add. Thank you.
We've got you, Councillor Burns online and Councillor Ward online. You're happy, Greg? Thank you. And I can't see your hand up, Nick, so I assume you're reasonably happy also. So we'll put those. So we've got a mover and a seconder.
Yeah, no, I'm happy.
Thanks, Nick. 1, 2, and 3. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against. So that's carried. All right. So we'll move to 4, 5, and 6. So the red notes there are just an addition that needs to be made. So looking for someone to move that, please. Grant again moves that. A seconder, thank you, Craig. So Grant, comment on that, Grant.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just firstly comment on item 4 up there concerning financing policy, financial strategy, and the revenue and financing policy, which are mentioned in the public consultation document as something that people can have a look at and comment on as part of any submissions that they might make. In terms of financial strategy, firstly, page 133 of the document, in terms of Council's financial vision, it's enabling us to achieve Council strategic goals by development of a more flexible funding sources and more effective use of existing funding to benefit our Canterbury community for current and future generations. And the strategic direction sort of sets out our long-term aspirations and strategic priorities. And that's aimed at delivering an improved environmental and community outcomes across the region. Environmental regulation and potential community protection. And there are risks. We identify that on page 134 and 135. And the key risk at the moment is the government legislative changes, those changes that have created a high level of uncertainty for us. And so Council, as stated in the audit report, we've made several assumptions and gave strong consideration, both in terms of financial pressures on the community, but also the need to progress forward towards improved outcomes. We obviously can't go backwards at a time when our environment continues to be degraded through inappropriate land use activity and overreaching our resources. Page 136, in terms of financial strip, we are conscious of the global and national inflationary pressures on ratepayers. And we've included prudence disclosure statements explaining our planned performance in relation to various benchmarks. In reality, the rates rises will range between 13 and 27%, depending on where people live and their individual circumstances. And on page 91, describes the comments on the rates affordability benchmark. And the last LTP identified a self-imposed limit of 5% as being unrealistic. And in this LTP, we have proposed a benchmark of 10% as a guide. However, we breached this in the first 2 years in order to meet intergenerational challenges before us. There, page 140 describes debt service benchmark, 142 is performance metrics, and 143 are financial assumptions. So they are worthwhile having a look at, and they're clearly articulated in the document. And the same, I won't go into the revenue and finance stuff, the same sort of things are applied in the revenue and financing section of the information on page 250 to 272. Probably the key thing there are changes in the way that we will be collecting fees and charges. And that'll be applied obviously to various consents and such as moorings and parks and charges, those sorts of things. And we'll now be in a position to review and amend fees and charges over the 10-year LTP period, reflecting increased costs and maintain cost recovery levels, should they be affected above the fixed budgets that we are applying. The revenue and finance also describes the funding principles, the 5 key principles that we use, who benefits, who, timeframes, causes, those sorts of things. So just wanted to draw people's attention to those because they're well articulated in that section as well. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I'll speak at the end. Thanks, Peter. Kia ora.
Hey, thank you for that. Thank you for leading us into those discussions, Grant, and we do hope the public do take note of those sections and are judicious in their commentary on those that come to us. That's always our hope on this. I've always been concerned that when we talk about long-term plans, that they're basically just budgets, actually. That's what it is. It's a budget about the money we take out of ratepayers' pockets and what we attribute it to in terms of the business that we're responsible for. And then some of those ambitious things that we want to do in other areas. So essentially, this is not a big, long, complicated process, but when you have references in these sections to section 92B and 93A and all the rest of it, it sounds like that it's more important than what it is, but that's all it is. It's a budgeting process. So I'll go to the council members who might want to comment, not necessarily on these, but on the LTP process as it stands and where we've got to. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the document going out as a consultation document, and the budget for that is what it is, and the community will provide us with advice, I suspect, on what they feel to be. There are pieces of work in there that we have to do and are required to do. There are pieces of work that I'm not so comfortable with, and I'm always challenged that we do not seem to be able to prioritise our work. But as I say, it's a consultation document, not requiring too much wordsmithing. It is for the community.
Just want to say thank you for all the work to date from staff, for adding a lot of information within such a concise document. I do support the plan myself. However, I do want to just sort of embed a bit of reiteration on some of the coastal issues, which I know I always talk about. However, it's such an integral part of our region. 800 kilometres of coastline, 11,620 kilometres square of coastal marine area that extends out to 12 nautical miles or 19 kilometres from shore. It is vital this is not only embedded within our planning framework, but that it's at the forefront of some of our focus in the coming months and years. I also want to say too that with regards to some of our essential braided rivers, the commentary talks about many rare and endangered species, but doesn't reiterate the same thing within such a vast amount of coastal space. We do have endangered species in the marine environment, some of which are only found here. And I feel that this long-term plan does not reflect that. However, I do support it in essence for a draft document. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, firstly, I also want to put a huge amount of gratitude to all the staff involved in our CE for oversight around this and getting the consultation document and the supplementary information to the point that we've got it to today. And I know it hasn't been plain sailing as you're building the new organisational focus on the core services and the resultant impact framework, so that we can measure how effective we are at achieving the desired outcomes, and more importantly, that we are efficient in getting the best bang for our ratepayers' buck. So this change of approach gets a big tick from me. So good. What I am struggling with is the belief that it's okay to take a document out for consultation that requires an increase of rates revenue of 24.2%. This is an additional 40 million or thereabouts on the current year's rates revenue, which is 165 million. That's going up to a proposed 205 million in 24-25. Similarly, the proposed work program goes from 280 million, which we're currently in, to 346 million. It feels to me that this table is actually tone deaf. Cost of living crisis it continually is top or thereabouts in surveys of our public concerns. And yes, this organisation is not immune either. Inflationary pressures have been significant for everyone, with some sectors, such as the agricultural sector, experiencing considerably higher inflation at 2 to 3 times, in fact, that of the national rate of around 7%. Why are we so different to any other business that has to cut its cloth to fit? What right have we to treat our ratepayers as an ATM machine or borrow for operational costs, cutely called natural capital in our financial policy? And it's the work on our plans. Look at the huge figures on page 87 of the document. The influence of what that borrowing over 10 years is going to be. Something's got to change. I am of the belief that there is an opportunity for further repriorisation, rephasing, and ceasing some work in these proposals. And whilst this is part of our statutory requirement to enable consultation, and as such, I suspect that this will get the council's support for adoption today, I hope it galvanises the whole community to become engaged and provide feedback. I do, however, fear we will not get a true representation, as those affected by the cost of living crisis are likely to be concentrating on just living day to day. Frankly, I'm embarrassed to be associated with the quantum of this proposed rate rise.
We'll go to you after Yayan. Thank you. And
Ko ka tiritiri o te moana e tū mai rā, ko tapu ai nuku ki te raki tai atu ki te pohurau ki te toka. Ko ka tiritiri o te moana ki uta, ko ka huka e rere atu ki tai. Ka waiora ki ka apahi ki whakateke te katoa waitaha tū tōu te marae o kahukura toi tū te marae o marukura, toi tū te iwi e tau nei ti heiwa Māori ora. Ko tai te wā mo te hapuri. Te tia tātou taunga rātou, tēnei wā ka whai whakahoka o te rahi, o te utu, o te mātou mahere, hōtaka wāroa. Ka taunaki mātou, kia piki rawa ngā utu take. Kia pono, Māori mātou, me oku hoa kaunihera nei, e tino tau ki tēnei āhuatanga. Ingari, i rite ki ngā kaunihera putono e te motu, he maha, hairo, ākupe. Hei anō te mihi ki a koe, e Stephanie, me ka rika raupa, o te kaunihera nei, mo tō mahi, hei whakahaere tēnei mahi. Acknowledging Stephanie and the staff for the work they have done to put this document and all information together. As already mentioned by councils, we as a council and councillors have tried to find as many savings as possible, as we have previously signalled a significant rate hike was likely, contrary to some. We have tried to balance rising costs and inflation with the communities and, of course, the government's growing expectations. We've got a lot of challenges ahead of us, including regional policy statement, biodiversity, the Canterbury Regional Biodiversity Strategy, meeting our public transport needs, climate change issues, and, of course, flood protection. We continue to work with our 10 Papatipu Runanga and to forge meaningful partnerships, especially in this current state with the government, and also with the 2 positions of the Ngaitahu councillors not guaranteed for the rest of this term. We will need to continue to push for central government to help and assist with funding for regional government, but as already shown by the current government, this will be hard. Now, this proposed 10-year LTP is the opportunity for our community to tell us how they think we should be spending their ratepayer dollar. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, a tēnā tātou katoa. Māori ora.
yeah, thank you. So we'll go to Greg, and then Vicky, then David, and then Ian. So Greg, thank you.
Kia ora. I hope you can hear me. The recording has been dropping in and out this morning, but I too would like to acknowledge the work that has gone into this. I'll keep this brief. We're no different to other TAs and regional authorities around the country with significant increases proposed for long-term plans. This is something obviously that is going to require some sort of redress with central government, and I know that local government New Zealand are working on proposals in order to be able to ensure that this isn't a yearly on year by year event. I too am not happy with the amount of increase proposed in the our recommendation, but I would say this is where the community will tell us, and it actually takes a bit of courage to put it in there rather than going out to the community with it with everything hacked to pieces out of it. So I'm looking forward to, as Councillor Sunkel said, getting out to our communities and ensuring that they provide the feedback and input so that when we do get to the time where we are hearing from them and then making a decision on where we head with the LTP, we will have some very good input as to what it will shape up like. Kia ora. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. I'd just like to acknowledge firstly how important it is that we hear from our communities, and I'm phase, and I'm looking forward to meeting constituents through this time and hearing from them. I do acknowledge how hard times are for many, and with interest rates and inflation and so on, times are tough. But we also have climate change and ecological impacts and decline, and those are constantly with us, and they're not going unless we act. And we really don't have the luxury of time. This consultation highlights some of the work that's really critical that we need to do in response to those things, such as flood management, such as protecting and enhancing our biodiversity and public transport delivery. And these are things which we have a really significant role to play in this organisation. I want to flag, because the consultation document really, I think, quite a straightforward read, and it connects through to the much bigger long-term plan document, and so people, I will hope, will have a good look at those things. Two things I want to particularly signal are a $1 million biodiversity fund option, which is proposed for the bank's potential to work with established and proven community groups working towards long-term goals for biodiversity in our area. It enables a stronger connection to the community, additional funding from philanthropic and government funds to be leveraged, and also the enormous volunteer support that these groups bring, which makes it a really cost-effective way to deliver important ecological goals in our area. And I think Christchurch residents are up for that. Second really big thing for us is public transport. For us as a city, I'm completely putting my hat on here as a Christchurch councillor. Public transport, our public transport system is okay. If you put the effort in and you've got the spare time, you can connect to it. For some who live on the high frequency routes, such as number 3, fantastic. But we need to do so much more to enable the majority of people to connect to this service, which people pay for. Our ratepayers do pay for public transport wherever you live in our city, but it's or out into Selwyn and Waimakariri down in Timaru. But that connection into the system is absolutely critical. We're putting forward a bold proposal that frankly brings our public transport system up to fit for purpose. It's not gold plated. We're not suggesting anything that's going to be world leading, but it will be functional, and it will make it so much easier for so many people to come and use our system. The services have become more affordable in the last few years, and that's proven to be popular. We have patronage numbers rising, fantastic. But we need to improve the frequency and the reliability. And so we're proposing that as an option. It does come with a cost. Again, I believe that people want to see that. We're seeing more and more people concerned about climate change, and here's something that we can do, given that just coming up with putting options forward that will improve well-being and environment.
Thank you. Like a lot of other speakers, I'd like to acknowledge the amount of work that has gone gone into the preparation of this document. I have a huge degree of empathy with Councillor Mackay in her delivery earlier, and I am going to support the document going out for consultation, however, and but 24% is very unpalatable for me. As I said, I'm happy for this to go out to consultation, but I think we need to be looking very seriously at prioritising where our money is being spent and getting the best bang for our buck at a realistic rate for our community. I'm critical of the process beyond consultation. We will sit in this room hearing submissions for a number of days. I often adopt a cynical approach that we are listening to serial submitters. The same people come year after year. And to a degree, I suppose, you know, we're preparing a document that these people can go through with a fine-tooth comb and find things to come and have a crack at us. I would much rather that we spend a couple of days out in the city, in the malls, out and about, talking to people, getting grassroots opinions of what's happening, rather than sitting in this chamber and hearing the same old message being spun out. So I will support the adoption of the document to go out for consultations. I'm not happy with the level of that we're going to strike, and I really want to see some prioritisation of our expenditure, and longer term a better process to be engaging with our community to get a meaningful outcome and informed response from our community, because I don't believe we get it sitting in this chamber hearing the same old people come in and tell us what they think.
Thank you, David. Mr. Chair, I'd like the opportunity just to talk about things I do support in this project, in this discussion document, and those that I don't. I certainly support the three core services approach and the glacial movements this council is making to be more accountable for the way we spend our money. I also support the strategy around the improvements in how we manage our rivers and the increase in capital expenditure in 30-year infrastructure in terms of our river management strategies. To recap, that we have a strategy, we've adopted a strategy as a council for in terms of the our rivers and catchment management, which roughly correspond to how we fund this and how we fund our river management and flood protection, and that's not only who we a revision of who we get our local rates from, but also applying to central government for support, return of the support they used to do for capital expenditure in particular, and that's an ongoing discussion. The second part of the strategy is to reorganise ourselves away from the old catchment board model to better reflect the communities of interest and the beneficiaries of flood protection, reflecting the development that's going on across the region. And that includes having the right consents in place and a whole lot of other stuff. And that's making sure that we're fit for purpose for if we do attract enough money. The third leg of our strategy is removing blockages from enabling us to do some work. My analysis of for every dollar of rates we raise, we only get to spend 40 cents of actually doing work. The rest goes in compliance and administration costs and consenting costs, which some would argue is a waste of money. And I think historically this council and central government have been very good at putting acting on actually achieving some of the things. So we are looking at the proposed expenditure in the rivers area has been well socialised and supported by our rivers and drainage district communities. but none of this comes as a shock to our communities. And it's really critical that we do have a clear and coherent capital expenditure plan, as is enunciated in our 30-year infrastructure, so that communities understand what we're doing in terms of providing them with resilience and protection, but also should the government come to the party with capital expenditure, we have a coherent plan for which we can then apply for those funds. This plan is also making tentative moves to recognise the society that better flood and river management are providing across the region, and not just on those areas of riparian interest, which the old catchment model. So we're moving to increasing our regional fund, and we're also responding to our Selwyn community in terms of total reorganisation as a first step. And so I support all that part in the plan, and I think it's and I hope that the community will support that. I think diversity, where we have a lot of different funds for different purposes, where if we actually had a reorganisation of how we spend that money, I think we could probably get better outcomes for less cost to our ratepayers. I'm also disappointed that this council is very reluctant to cut expenditure of projects which now, I would argue, have run their time because of changes in circumstances or better ways of doing things. And so we're not doing the analysis of whether for every dollar, to be small amounts of money, but it took us something like 3 years to disband a committee that never did anything for the last 3 years. So I think this council, when it's proposing substantial rate rises, has been deficient in actually not analysing scrupulously enough the amount of money we have spent in certain areas, and we should have done that before we went out to our community for this substantial rate rise.
Good, thank you for that, Councillor McKenzie. We've got Councillor Karakia, and then we'll go to you, Councillor Ward. And I note that Councillor Davies, Councillor Swiggs, and Councillor Diche have not put their hand up yet. So can you consider whether you want to do that? You have actually, have you? Good. Okay, no.
E mihi atu ka koe anō te kai whakahaere. Kei te pirangi au ki te mihi kia mātou kaimahi me nā o kuhoa o kai kaunihera. Amo a rātou mahi me te nui nā o mātou kai utu reti e tautoko i te nui nā i tautoko i tā mātou e aha te utu ki Waitaha. I want to, what I've just done is acknowledged our staff. And to the kōrero previous on the document itself reassures me that around this table, this representation, is that there are various parts of this that my fellow colleagues are actually addressing. And so this is actually part of pulling the waka together. One thing that I want to say is that this is my first long-term plan, and it's probably going to be my last, because when we look at this thing, is that I talk about the Ngaitahu Representation Bill, and it is a fait accompli. And I likened it originally to the guillotine. And all I can say there is that we're already in the Bastille, awaiting the guillotine. But anyway, we'll make the best of this by where we will, Ngaitahu appointed councillors have definitely had an input into this. And what I want to do here is just to go through a couple of points here, because within the engagement, significance and Māori participation, what we're talking about here in this actually, and that's what we'll do, is that we need to re-look at our engagement. And Councillor East almost articulated it before. But the way I see that, that is our job, to sit here and listen to whoever wants to come and submit. But it's also our job to get out there and talk, engage with constituents. And so when you do that in a Ngaitahu way, it's actually about going to Papatupa Runanga meetings. It's actually going to Tangi. It's actually going to Hui and actually engaging with our people. And that is actually what we must do. And that's what we will do. But important things here, I just want to mention two things here, particularly within the document. And I know we can make sort of small changes, but there's one thing in here, and particularly it's in page 53, because the relationship talks about aspirations. We've had enough of that word aspirations. I think that aspirations word should be actually changed to requirements. That we actually require this in this document. We require this to happen in order that we can protect and make better the environment. So that word is one that our people will pick up on. And now we've got to the point where it is a requirement. The other part is that we want to be included. Te Runanga o Ngaitahu should be included in that other part where you actually, when you're specifically talking about engagement with the Greater Christchurch and all this, the whole symphony of it, even though we're mentioned in the Greater Christchurch Partnership, it should be separate. It should be there as Te Runanga o Ngaitahu. And so they are just a few things. I mean, I will support this document. I will support this document. In some things, the jury is still out, but we have to actually take the next step. A lot of work's been done, a lot of discussion, a lot of kōrero. Now let's see what happens. Let's just support it and go forward. I do have a lot of empathy actually for our ratepayers, and particularly with my colleague Claire, who actually articulated it well in some ways. It is a hefty rise, but at the end of the day, cost pressures the organisation is carrying, we have to remember that. Continual cost pressures that are not going to get any easier. So let's have faith in this new regime that's come in and see what kind of tricks they've got up their sleeve to actually be able to try and alleviate some of these cost pressures that local government has continually been on the receiving end of it. So kia ora everyone, ngā mihi, kia koutou.
Thank you, Nook. So we'll move to you, Councillor Ward.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're coming through good, thanks.
Yes, as Greg alluded to, the reception has been pretty patchy this morning, but anyway, firstly, I'd just like to thank everybody for all the work they've done. I mean, it's been a big effort, and I'm happy for the document to go out for consultation, but I am really, really concerned about the proposed rate increases. And okay, I know in the long-term plan it's going to be sort of around that 20-odd% for the first 2 years, but I hope that's not the new norm when a lot of businesses out there and farmers and individuals in towns are faced with huge inflationary pressures. I think we do need to look at prioritising our work. I mean, I do support the fact we are working on our 3 core services, but I think as Claire alluded to and Councillor East, we do need to cut our cloth a bit to meet the needs going forward. And I am worried that we are borrowing money to undertake some work. I mean, it's a chance for our community to express their concerns. And I've already had a few who have told me that they're not happy with the rates we're thinking about. But let's put it out there, see what happens. And I mean, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, like everybody else, I'll just say thanks to everybody for the work, especially the councillors around the table who have shared a lot of views. It's been interesting just to listen, which is always good as well, which is what we're going to do. I spent the last weekend at 4 different community meetings, and have already started the process of discussing this long-term plan with some of the communities. And I think one of them I nearly got walked out the door, but it wasn't that bad after we sort of explained what was going on. But I wholeheartedly support our investments in public transport, as has been said. The current system is failing too many people. If you just look at the graph on page 62, it shows how little we have as a council invested in public transport for far too long. So I think that step change is well needed. And this budget does propose doubling our public transport investment in 3 years. It's a big step change. Likewise, budget increases for flood protection are simply must do stuff. Climate disruptions are really happening. And this is around from farms to families, robust infrastructure. It safeguards so many of the things that we value in our communities. Likewise, efforts to rejuvenate the biodiversity are commendable. Yet I hope through this consultation process that we articulate what those measured outcomes will be. Good intentions will pave good roads, but we must have clearly defined outcomes. Likewise, modernising our regulatory frameworks as laid out in the plan are of merit. However, we can't do planning for just planning's sake again. We have to do it right. And there is a lot of uncertainty at the moment around our planning framework. And this is where one of my big bugbears for this plan gives me some pause. Deficit funding for staff budgets are a tough sell when existing revenues are straining to cover so many of the essentials. As councillors, in my opinion, community trust obliges us to model financial responsibilities. Through the consultation, I am hopeful, though, that we can identify compromises and balance, especially when it comes to borrowing money to pay staff wages. But we also must interrogate the assumptions that we have around what the government is going to provide us in terms of its funding as well, because this is going to pose some real fiscal jeopardy when we move forward. But I just wanted to zoom out a little bit here. I've been thinking about this over the last few days as well. Now, we have limited budget as a council, which has showed that central government collects 93% of the taxes in New Zealand, and local government is 7%. We are saddled with an outdated, inadequate funding structure. Imagine if Wellington had to budget the way we had to budget. Could you imagine the show that would be? So yeah, for context, councils tax 6% through our local rates and charges. And I'm just going to pick on one thing that I've been thinking about here, which is just ridiculous. Our work programs, especially in our flood resilience programs, are protecting so much land, public land and private land. The irony is we're protecting public land from the government that we can't even charge rates on. Yet we rate ourselves on our public land. So go figure, this needs to change. This is a deficiency that demands redress nationwide throughout the whole country. But we can't change the world right now. We're just doing our budget. But anyway, for the here and now, I'm just going to say straight up, I can't support endorsing this for adoption, even for consultation. It's really for me around the imbalanced budget that I just can't move forward on. But make no mistake, in my mind, the aims of this budget are serving the community well and are valid. And I hopefully that in the next few months, we can find some fiscal prudence so that we can, in my view, have a balanced budget that our communities deserve. Again, my stance doesn't diminish the progress that we must take.
Mr. Chair, firstly, I speak in support of this consultation document going out today and the motions proposed. I thank Stephanie and our officers for the countless briefings and hours that have gone into this, particularly the reform from a portfolio management approach to focusing on 3 core services. To set out my thinking going into the plan's consultation, the hearings, the deliberations, and the adoption in June, I would like to read a memorandum I made to my local party, our Christchurch East Electorate Committee, at the end of January. I have spent the summer visiting the region. I have tramped 12 mountains and made 2 crossings from the east to the west of the main divide. I've travelled 400 kilometres by foot and have identified 120 species, exotic and native, in our mountainous region. I have been struck at the impact of this experience, the nature, the exercise, and the sunlight. The region is golden yellow like a desert across vast swaths of the Molesworth, the Mackenzie, and even the Port Hills. The vast brave plains and hilltops are covered with exotics, conifers, gorse, and thistle brush. Harriers and magpies litter the country roads and nest in the high country scrub. The Gallus nivalis, the alpine grasshopper, sunbathes in the mid-alpine country, hopping from greywhack boulder to common mountain daisy, avoiding the tramper's boot. From the mountains, you build a better picture. Down the plains, agriculture, mana whenua, private land, regional, territorial holdings, our shining city by the peninsula. One thing I've noticed about our regional estate owned by the ratepayers of Canterbury, administered by us, is how it connects our coastal areas to the mountains. It's often the land that borders our rivers, their braid plain ecologies. And of course, we inherited these schemes from catchment boards when we had reformed in '89. Are the region's biggest assets. I have faith that Chair Scott, Deputy Chair Pauling, our Chief Executive, our officers, and ultimately this council can seize this opportunity on behalf of the region and its ratepayers.
Thank you for that, Joe. So there's no more speakers in the general context on this, so we'll move to the mover and seconder of this, and we'll go to you, Craig, as the seconder, have the right.
Tau tēnā koutou. Tuatai e tautoko hau te mihi ki ngā kaimahi, ki ngā kaunihere hoki, I o tātou mahi I tēnei mahere roa. Nei te mihi ki a koutou, so just acknowledging, like others have done, the work of our staff in particular, but also our councillors that have worked on this long-term plan. Right, tēnā koe, Joe, mō tō, hi. For raising an important issue that I start with. The thing is, I know that making rates is not something that we do lightly. That's one of our main responsibilities as a regional council, as local government. And we have more and more responsibilities put onto us at constant pressure from our own communities and ourselves, we're ratepayers too, to keep those rates low. But keeping rates low, in my opinion, has led to underinvestment in key infrastructure, often at the cost of our natural resources, the very things Joe just mentioned, the classic tragedy of the commons. And managing these natural resources is a key part of what we're here for. And, to those people that have said we haven't made prioritisation, we did. We started with 17%. 37% with all the work that we believed was needed. And then we prioritised and got that to 25%. So we did, we did a bit of work. We didn't just go, yep, do it all. We've already done that. But the key point that Dion made is that the local government funding model is broken. It's been addressed in the Future for Local Government report that was put forward to government last year. I'm really hoping that this government reads that and picks up on some of the things in there. And some more stats like Dion has raised. Since 1895, rates have stayed at 2% of GDP, while taxes have risen from under 10% to more than 40% GDP. Like, come on, people.
we've kept rates low. Local councillors have done a good job at keeping rates low for their communities because we're part of those communities. Meanwhile, government has taken more and more. Some of the solutions put forward in that Future for Local Government report was a $1 billion annual transfer to local government, which is equivalent to the GST that we're charged on rates. But we charge GST just to collect rates. Come on, we should be given that back. Local government should be given that back. We wouldn't be having these arguments about how much we're charging our poor residents if these things were done. We'd have the money we need to do the things we need to do to protect our natural resources. Rates on Crown land that Dion has mentioned. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. That would help too. Government co-funding for wellbeing, intergenerational climate change fund. These were all tools put forward in the Future Local Government report. So I just want to put that as context to the rate rise that we've put out there. The other thing that we need to acknowledge is that a large part of the rise, the 25.7 above the 17% on inflation, is about the river resilience work that we want to do, that we know is important, that Ian eloquently spoke to. Also planning. We've got an ongoing schedule of planning that we need to do. That's not going to stop. Our RPS is 10 years old. Our coastal plan is 20 years old. We're behind in actual fact in that. Yes, our land and water plan documents are up to date, still are. There's a debate about that, but that's not going to stop. You have to keep up with the times, keep up with the technology, keep up with the what the feedback we're getting from our natural resources is. Too bad about the 2 minutes. No, 2 minutes left. Oh, cool. All good. But that's my point about the context of this rate rise. And like Greg said, also just because I've been listening, that a lot of other councils, not just regional councils, are facing similar increases. So we're not out of step with the rest of the country. And like I'm saying, it comes back to the funding model was broken. So that's that bit I wanted to start with. In terms of our consultation document and the supplementary information, I do congratulate our staff as well. Previous term, this is way better than last time. I think it's clear, it's exciting even. I like the way it's set out, and of course, acknowledgements to our staff and to you, Stephanie, and the leadership of the senior leadership team about our core services model. And I think that's presenting things in a new way that's easier to understand, it's clearer. And if you look at the graphics that are in our consultation, people can get a sense of what we're trying to do and what we have to do. And I agree with Claire that it's exciting about the impact framework and the new way we're going to measure ourselves. And I think that's really critical in what's going forward. And hopefully, Ian, it leads to some of the things that you mentioned as well about how we can prioritise better, because I agree with that too, but not at the cost of protecting and managing our natural resources. In terms of the things I'm really excited about in this plan, the two specific proposals that we've got there about the Christchurch targeted rate for biodiversity. I'm really excited to see what our community thinks about that. We know there's a massive demand for biodiversity work amongst our community organisations, our landowners. They've been calling out for it, so hopefully this helps. So I'm really looking forward to that. And of course, the Selwyn district-wide rate for river resilience work. Totally think that's necessary. It's a way we need to go. We need to do that for all of our catchments across Canterbury. And this is a first step in that direction. So I totally support that work. Lastly, the biodiversity funding stuff. It's based on forecasts, on estimates. And while that's necessary right now in lieu of a fully researched and costed strategy, like we have for river resilience, that's exactly why, Dion, we need our Canterbury biodiversity strategy to be done, because it's not our community's job to tell us prioritise the money that's needed for biodiversity. That's our job, and we've been given that by the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity as an example of how the government gives us more and more jobs to do, but no money to do it with. So totally support this, going out to our community for consultation and looking forward to what they have to say about it.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And also things that Councillor Pauling has been saying. introduced a new way of thinking by focusing on the three core services, and I'll reiterate those again: environmental regulation and protection, community preparedness and response to hazards, and public transport. This reorganisation of the previous portfolio approach is designed to provide a more holistic and integrated outcome-focused framework that considers all the well-beings, environment, society, culture, and the economy. We are proposing an investment of 340 million in the first year of the long-term plan that will address current commitments, a focus on doing more for our environment and making changes at a faster pace. We can't go backwards at a time when our environmental footprint continues to result in degraded landscapes and overuse of our natural resources. We have consulted with our communities a lot over these last few years. For example, in the development of the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, 3,000 people submitted on the GC 2050 surveys. The top 5 main issues. We're not doing enough for climate change. There's a lack of affordable housing options, traffic congestion, pollution and waste management, and concern about the loss of natural ecosystems and indigenous biodiversity. Then again, in the Hui Hui Mai engagement process, climate impacts are only going to get worse over time, and we will have to adapt. And not adapting and changing how we manage land and water will result in significant financial cost for future generations. This long-term plan will address many of these issues, including transitioning to consideration of more cost-effective nature-based solutions for river and land management, evolving to a sub-catchment focus to deliver outcomes for local communities across our diverse rural landscapes has already captured the interest of many farmer collectives. And I am hopeful that the targeted rates trial in the Selwyn district, designed to manage whole of catchment issues and river management, will be a forerunner that can be applied to all rivers in our districts, in all districts. The proposed targeted rate for biodiversity in Christchurch and Banks Peninsula will deliver improvements at a larger landscape scale more quickly. And I'm totally supportive of this LTP consultation document. The proposed options make it clear that costs are of what costs are and what an option can or won't achieve. So that gives the public a participation, a clear indication of what we're looking at, and hopefully we will get some really good responses next year.
Thank you. Again, can I just reiterate from my point of view, thank you, staff. I know this is an anxious time for staff and the LTP process, and everyone takes a big breath at the start and holds it for a long, long time. Done, and congratulations to everyone to get us to this point in time. No further ado, we'll move to the to 4, 5, and 6, and the reason that the red writing is there supporting information attachment 7.1.2 and noting a space to be added between the words achieved on page 15, supporting information 1 and on 23 is to get those in just before 7, because if we don't approve 7, we can't do it then. So without any further delay, I'll put that to you. So all those in favour of 4, 5, and 6, please say aye. All those against? Do you want your noes recorded? Okay, thank you. So that resolution has passed. Well done, councillors, for your consideration on that, and also your words that you put in around that. Now 7, we'll put 7 up. 7 is really just a standard process. Further discussion, I'll put that to all those in favour, please say aye. Those against, that's carried. So thank you very much. Well done, everybody in the room. We can get it out the door, which is great. So I just want to reiterate, I do hope that the points, excuse me, the points that you made, Grant, about the numbers of the spatial plan, who you might, that we get them. We get them in this document. We might have more than 4 days of deliberation or 4 days of hearings if that does happen, but yeah, let's look forward to that. And I think you need to beat that drum, Kilo and David. Thank you very much for being here to do that. We can move to 7.2, which is plan changes response to the Armour decision. And Andrew Parrish, Andrew, if you would come to the table, thank you. And so just noting that Councillor Robinson has declared a conflict of interest and will sit back from the discussion. Thank you for that, Genevieve. And also noting before we started that we've got Councillor Karakia and Councillor Sunkel and maybe Councillor Cranwell leaving at 15 minutes past 12. Is that right? Just John and yeah. So thank you.
The purpose of this report is to seek your approval to proceed with a targeted plan change and the associated budget to resolve the unintended consequences that have become apparent through the findings of the Supreme Court in their recent case, the recent Cloud Ocean versus Aotearoa water action. The report seeks a resolution from you to commence with that targeted plan change work, and it notes that we will be aiming for a June 2024 notification date, and it further notes that we'll be following the standard process that's currently in application.
So just on the $500,000 to June 24, is that a maximum? Like, is that up to, or is that actually costing, and that is the actual cost?
Thank you, Councillor. You'll note in the paper that we're intending on bringing an update back to this council in March. That is the $500,000 is absolutely an estimate at this stage, and we'll refine that cost over time. We've needed that cost to bring in external resource because there isn't available capacity within the planning section. And I have Jackie Todd in the meeting room today overseeing the proceeding. That is our independent person who's come in to support us doing that work.
A really tight timeline, it feels like. I'm just wondering, is there anything critical factors, and is there anything that we need to do to support that?
Not at the current point in time. But you're absolutely correct. This is an incredibly tight time frame. That is the direction that you as a council have provided to us. And so we've cut that time frame to the shortest extent possible to resolve those unintended consequences.
If there's no further clarifications with Andrew, I think you step back, Andrew. Thank you for that. We all understand that this has been sitting there. Today is the opportunity to get the two things. One is to get this into the public arena. The notification that we've got an issue here, we need to solve that. And the other thing is to look at the money it's going to cost to do that. So we'll get this. Can we get this moved and seconded first? Are you going to move this, John? Thank you. And a second to thank you, Craig. So discussion about this from councillor's perspective.
Just to say, I'm really relieved that we finally got this here. It does feel like it's taken a little while even to get this far, but I'm comfortable to see that we're putting the accelerator on now. And I think we just really need to do what we can to get this sorted, noting that it is having unintended impacts on both environmental outcomes and community outcomes.
Make it very clear to everyone in the room as early as today, or as late as today, whatever you say about that. We have engaged with Naitohu. We have their support in terms of this process, and we're very clear that we can move on. Councillor Swiggs.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate what Councillor Southworth was saying. It's interesting to see some of these things where you've got something you're trying to do to support the environment has unintended environmental impacts that you're trying to protect in the first place, which is interesting. But I was going to ask you, Chair, can you put number 3 separately, please? can you please place number 3 separately?
Yeah, the movement. Yeah.
Sorry, the request is, can we disconnect 3 from 1 and 2? We've moved them. We've moved. I'll finish. Can I finish what I'm about to say? We've moved them as a whole, so I need to go to the mover and seconder to see if they're happy with that. Push your button and say what you want.
I am not sure what the intent would be. We have an estimated price. We have no guarantee until further work is done.
I don't agree with the debt funding thing. So I want to see this go forward, but I don't agree with the debt funding. That's all.
I'm pretty happy just leave that where it is at the moment. I think that they sit together because the two things that we were trying to do was to get visibility and cost, and they have done that. Mechanism for how we get the money is pertinent because this is a 23-24 issue. Budgets are full, so we need to get some money. We need to get on. There's a tight time frame. That's how it's to be funded, and I think that's if we start to swing on that, it's going to make it more difficult. Ian.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was really just responding to a comment that Councillor Karakia said, which is that the implications of what we're deciding today sits with Tua Hureri Runang. The unintended consequences of the implications of what has happened because of this hour decision falls across the whole of the region. I just want to remind everybody around here that that this is affecting consent applicants and renewals right across the region.
So in response to that statement, we are aware that the width of the concern. However, Ngāi Tuhuriri were part of the action for Awa, and we needed to go to them to explain the processes that we were going to do to unpick that, and which we've done, and they have given their support for that. Quite confident that we've picked the right path, but there will be further consultation and a wider process once we get the piece of work that Andrew's indicated done.
Just to be absolutely clear, I wasn't criticising Ngāi Tuhuriri. I was just saying that there is a wider spectrum.
I mean, the basis of what I just said was actually about mana whakahaere actually in the Ngāi Tuhuriri Takiwa. Absolutely, it will affect further out, but make the point, it is about Ngāi Tuhuriri Takiwa.
So again, I just re-emphasise the fact that we are dealing with something that was a high process, and the drafting gates that are available to us will be brought to us. Andrew's nodding vigorously over there. Is it in March, Andrew? On the 14th of March. So all we're doing here is acknowledging that this is an issue. We need some cash. We need to get on and do it. Anybody else? Great. Yeah, we can go to the seconder now. If there's no further discussion, we can go to the seconder.
Got it. Yeah. Hey, thank you. I think this is a really important piece of work that we've got, on top of our RPS as well. To rectify this planning stuff around the Awa decision. But the courts have told us that the take and use thing is important, so we need to do something about that. Yes, it's had some unintended consequences for a whole bunch of good work that goes on in the region. So yeah, I'm happy to get on with it as soon as possible so that we can fix those things. And I think that in terms of the debt funding, I'm really comfortable with that because, these plans last decades, like our coastal plan is 20 years old, like I said earlier on. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to debt fund them over those periods. So I'm really comfortable with that as well. Got it.
Sure, I think Craig and John is, you still want to speak, John?
It speaks for itself, Mr. Chairman. Everything that has been said is needed to be said is done. Thank you.
So they've got a mover and a seconder on this motion, and they've both spoken to that. Can I to you resolutions 1, 2 and 3. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? Yeah, you're pushed back, so you're abstaining also. So that motion has passed. So thank you very much for that. That gives us an opportunity to move forward. Now, just moving to the further business, there's no PX. So our next meeting is on the 20th of March 2024 at 10:30. Any changes this time will publicly advertise and update on the Environment Canterbury website. And I'm not too sure who's Karakia. We're going to move to finish.
It's me. Hai, kia ora tātou, Karakia, whakamutunga o tātou nei hui. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui o tāne, kia wātea, kia māma, tēnā kau te tinana, te waru i te ara tangata, koe rai rongo, whakiiri aki ki runga kia tīna, haumi e hui e tā